Hello, hello. We're live. We have been very busy at Stackbit. I feel like I start every update like that because we're constantly iterating and building for you, and I always get really excited to share with you some of our updates. And in this week's updates, I want to start off by really highlighting or sharing with you something that's very close to my heart, which is a series that myself and our developer experience engineer, Sean, have been doing every Wednesday. We're going live Wednesday at 1 p.m. on a weekly basis, and we're bringing on different guests, we're covering different topics, building things, too often breaking things, and just learning together. So make sure you join them to see what we're getting up to, bring your questions, and it's just a really fun hour to learn and build together. Actually, speaking of learning and building, Sean has a demo for us. Over to you, Sean.
Hey there. I want to talk to you a little bit about annotations today. Annotations are the thing that makes inline visual editing possible with Stackbit. It builds this relationship between where your content lives in the source and where it shows up on the front of your page. And that's what enables us to highlight elements, to let you click inside elements and change text on the fly, immediately saving it back to the content source. Doing this requires defining a series of data attributes as data SB object ID and then a series of data SB field paths that all work together to build this predictable shape of content that Stackbit understands. We've been spending some time recently exploring ways to lower the friction and maximize the satisfaction in this process. I wanted to give you a short kind of peek behind the curtain so you can see what we're playing with. And I'm going to show you 3 different concepts here that you can add to your application today, which will make the process of working with annotations immediately easier. Let's take a look at how all of this works. So in my application here, I have this one main composable and flexible page, and surrounding all of the editable content on my page, I have this div where I have the data SB object ID defined, and if we go back to my preview, we'll notice that is the direct path to this file. This is because I'm using file-based content. Now, if you're working with a headless CMS, that's likely going to be the unique ID in that content source. And then as I drill down into the content of the page, we'll see a series of data SB field paths. And what Stackbit can do is it can take these field paths and it can shove them together and build a string that represents the content in your content source. When you have this nested type of content, which doesn't necessarily only exist within the context of file-based content, other headless CMSs will let you embed objects inside of individual page level objects. And when we do that, what we essentially have to do is we have to continue to pass these field path values down the chain. And so I've defined sections here, but look at the way this is working. Now when I loop through my sections, I have this dynamic component which is responsible for resolving the component. And to that, I pass this annotation attribute, and it's just .index. And then what that means is that every component needs to have something that is looking to extract that property and render it on its wrapper. We said this was going to a card grid first, so let's look at the card grid section. So then the card grid section has to pull the data SB field path, redefine it, and then it gets down to cards, and it is going to add the field path for cards, and then also add the field path for the individual card. And then the card has to do the same thing. I have to redefine this field path, and then finally I can terminate and get to heading, subheading, and make these things editable. Okay, so that is a lot, and it makes sense that it can be really easy to lose your place. And so what I want to talk to you about today is a combination of 3 practices that we can put together to make this process quite a bit easier. And you're going to take it and add your own flavor to it. Okay, here's another project that is the exact same project. We're just handling annotations a little bit differently. And where I'm going to start is in the utility method that is transforming all of our content. It's retrieving the content from the source, which in this case is local files, then transforming it into a shape that our pages and components expect. Now, what we can do in this process, which is my utils/content, what we can do is where we're adding all these extra attributes that are helpful to Stackbit, we can attach annotation properties to the object. So when we send props to the page, we've already defined all the annotations that we're going to need to use above the explicit field level. And I'll show you what I mean. But first, let me do this. Let's do a console log here of the content. And I'm going to start this server up. Okay, here's the beginning of my page object. And we see here's my card grid section, and down here, sections.1. And then in the cards, we are continuing that path. So we're not just adding, say, .0 or cards.0, but we have the full absolute field path for each of these cards. So this first card has sections.1.cards.0, and we can use that explicitly to make adding annotations quite a bit simpler. Now you can just take this concept, apply it to your transformations, and then shove it in your components and be good to go. I'm going to add a couple more ideas here. The first is that we use, wherever we can, absolute paths. And then we can combine that approach with a set of utility methods that will make it really easy to just pass props to this utility method, not have to know where we are in the tree, and have it all work out fine. Let's kind of take a look at how this is working. Okay, now in this project, I have removed all data attributes and I'm only using helper methods. And generally you're going to see one of two helper methods used. One I'm calling annotations and the other one I'm calling toFieldPath. And what the annotations helper method is going to do is it's going to look inside an object and it's going to extract any relevant attributes that apply to annotations, and then it's going to render them as props in that particular element. So let's take a quick look at that utility function. That's basically what it's doing. It's just looking through these props. It says, do I find one of the right data attributes? And if I do, set it to the appropriate value in those props. So because the page object has data SB object ID as a property added to it during the transformation phase, all we need is this on that wrapping div, and we don't have to remember the name of that particular data attribute or anything like that. And the added benefit is because we have these helper methods, we can also say, hey, if we're not in development mode, just don't do anything, and then we don't render these attributes to the DOM when we're in production. Second, really big win here is that we don't have to pass anything in to child components, especially when we're looping through something. Let's show you how the card grid and card component look in this project. So the card grid section, first of all, we don't have to pass anything to it. There is nothing that is getting explicitly defined in our page that we're passing to the card grid section. But because we added that property when we transform the data, we then have it on this wrapper, and we can just call this annotations helper again. And then on the cards, we do the same thing. We don't have to pass anything to that card, but in the card, on the wrapper, we can add the annotations helper, and then individually on the heading, where we want to add the heading annotation, we give it the props context, which has the explicit path, the absolute field path, and then it builds that. And let's take a look at the result in the DOM. Okay, now in the DOM, I have the same data SB object ID, but I didn't have to type it explicitly into my application code. And then if I come down to a card heading, I just have the entire field path rendered here. But I have the absolute path everywhere. So if we're using that explicit path, Stackbit doesn't try to daisy chain these field path values together. It knows you're using an absolute path. It's designed to read it in either direction. And so we can still highlight and edit everything inline just like we could before, but we don't have to really get lost in the application. We just do all of this processing in a nice, compact way when we're transforming the content. So these are just some quick tips that I hope you can take away and apply to your application today. Try them, give us some feedback, and we'll take your idea into consideration while we're working on building this turnkey solution that will make working with annotations even easier. That's it for me this week. I'll see you next time.
Okay, that just made the world of annotations a lot more exciting if you ask me. Speaking of annotations, I'll link down the docs below so you can learn more about annotations, or maybe you're already using them in a Stackbit project. This is just another way to really look at them. For those of you who are on an enterprise plan, we just released new documentation on custom roles. I'll link it down below, but it really goes in depth about the different settings around it and how you can ensure you're setting the customization for each person on your team in the best way possible. And last thing I want to talk about is our head of design, Asaf, recently did a demo for IDEO. And what he did with the help of our developers is take our existing demo ops website and turn it into IDEO's website. But of course with Stackbit, it is now editable. You can move around components, save templates, build new pages. And he shared it with them, and I'm going to be sharing it with you tomorrow. So I will link it down below for anyone who wants to check it out. It's a great watch, and Asaf is always great to connect with because he is so knowledgeable in the world of design that he gives everything sheds a different light on everything. All right, those are our main updates. I tried to keep it short and sweet for you all. If you have any questions though, leave down below in the comments, and I will see you all soon. Thanks everyone.